The ink was still wet on the final decree, or so it felt. Divorce granted. A simple legal phrase ending 2 decades of my life. I sat in my small, quiet apartment, the one concession Mark had made in the settlement that left me with little else, the papers spread on the second-hand table. The silence was supposed to be a release, a clean slate. Instead, it screamed with the emptiness he left behind. And then the phone call came. Not from Mark, of course. He hadn't spoken directly to me in months, everything filtered through lawyers and clipped emails. This was Susan, a well-meaning friend of a friend, her voice chirpy, oblivious. "Eleanor, isn't it wonderful? I just saw on Facebook, Mark and Veronica. Married today. Right after the courthouse." My hand froze midair, reaching for a glass of water. Married. Today. The day our divorce was finalized. Not weeks later, not even days. That day. The sheer audacity of it sucked the air from the room. It wasn't just betrayal anymore, it was a calculated, public erasure. A triumphant declaration that I was irrelevant, replaced the instant the law allowed it. The world outside continued, cars honked, birds sang, but my world tilted on its axis, silent and spinning. Veronica. Younger, brighter, the woman he'd sworn was just a colleague, a friend, a misunderstanding when I'd first found the hushed texts, the late nights. Now she was his wife, celebrated openly, joyfully, on the very day the formal end of us was stamped and sealed. It felt like a punch to the gut, followed by a cold, creeping dread. How long? How long had this been planned? Was this remarriage, this almost indecent haste, part of the plan all along? Was I the only one living in the reality of a dying marriage while they were already building their future on its grave? The bitterness rose, hot and sharp, threatening to choke me. Resignation had been my companion for months, a heavy cloak I wore to weather the storm of the divorce. I'd accepted the loss, the unfairness, the loneliness. But this wasn't resignation. This was a fresh wound, deliberately inflicted, meant to twist the knife one last time. It wasn't enough that he left, that he took most of the assets, that he moved on with indecent speed. He had to mark the occasion, stain the very day of my legal freedom with the spectacle of his new beginning. A beginning built on a lie that had stretched back, I now realized with horrifying clarity, much further than I'd allowed myself to believe. The image of them standing there, smiling, exchanging vows, while I sat alone with the cold reality of divorce papers, was a stark, brutal tableau. It wasn't just about the marriage ending, it was about the profound disrespect, the utter lack of empathy for the woman he'd shared 20 years, a home, a life with. He didn't just leave, he celebrated leaving. He didn't just replace me, he flaunted her the moment he was legally free to do so. A wave of something new washed over the pain and bitterness. Something colder, harder. It wasn't rage, not yet. It was a chilling clarity. They wanted to hurt me. They wanted me to see, to know, to feel diminished. They wanted me to disappear quietly, a forgotten chapter. But the image that popped into my mind wasn't of me shrinking away. It was of a place. A specific place. The Grand Beaumont Hotel. I'd overheard Veronica gushing about it months ago, how she dreamed of staying in their legendary honeymoon suite, the Imperial Suite, with its city views and private terrace. Mark, with a dismissive wave, had said it was overpriced. Now I understood. It wasn't overpriced for her, for their special day. A dark, twisted seed of an idea began to sprout in the barren landscape of my despair. It was audacious. It was perhaps a little mad. But it felt right. A sudden, potent surge of defiance. If they wanted to rub their happiness in my face, to make their new beginning a public spectacle on that day, then perhaps I should be a part of their scenery. Not weeping on the sidelines, but present. Visible. Inconvenient. The silence in the apartment no longer screamed emptiness. It hummed with a nascent energy, a forbidden thought taking root. What if? What if I didn't just sit here and take it? What if I met their audacious cruelty with a quiet, deliberate act of my own? The Grand Beaumont. The imperial suite. Their honeymoon suite. The perfect stage for my own unexpected appearance. The thought sent a shiver down my spine, part fear, part exhilaration. It was the opposite of shrinking away. It was stepping directly into the path of their celebration. It was taking the script they'd written for my humiliation and adding a scene they hadn't anticipated. The phone was still in my hand. My fingers, guided by a sudden, fierce resolve, typed the hotel name into the search bar. The website loaded, showcasing opulent images of the suite, the city sparkling below. It was breathtakingly expensive, an amount I couldn't honestly afford with the pittance of a settlement. But money suddenly seemed irrelevant. This wasn't about money. It was about something else entirely. Redemption? Revenge? A desperate, final assertion of self in the face of utter nullification? I didn't know. All I knew was the burning need to disrupt the perfect picture they were painting. The dates. I checked the dates. They had surely booked it for tonight, tomorrow night. Was it possible? Could the universe, in its own dark, ironic way, allow this? I selected the current date and the following night. The search results loaded. Imperial Suite. Available. A small, almost imperceptible tremor ran through my hand. Available. The word seemed to mock me, to dare me. It was an impossibility, wasn't it? The most sought-after suite in the city on a weekend, booked by a celebrating couple? Unless they hadn't booked it after all. Perhaps Veronica's dreams hadn't translated into action. Or perhaps they were staying somewhere else tonight, planning the suite for tomorrow. Or perhaps, most deliciously, they had booked it and something had gone wrong. A glitch. A cancellation. Whatever the reason, the opportunity lay bare before me. The mouse hovered over the Book Now button. My heart hammered against my ribs. This was it. The point of no return. The moment I stopped being the wronged wife and became something else entirely. Something unpredictable. Something dangerous, not to them physically, but to their carefully constructed narrative. The silence in the apartment was gone, replaced by the roaring in my ears, the frantic beat of my own pulse. This single act, this one reservation, felt heavier, more significant, than signing the divorce papers ever had. Those papers had felt like an ending forced upon me. This felt like a beginning I was choosing for myself. A beginning forged in the fires of betrayal, yes, but a beginning nonetheless. I clicked. The confirmation email arrived seconds later. My name, the Grand Beaumont, the Imperial Suite. 2 nights. It was done. There was no turning back. A strange calm settled over me, a stillness that felt both fragile and unbreakable. They had stolen my past, tried to steal my future. But they hadn't stolen my capacity to act. They hadn't stolen my quiet, simmering strength. And they certainly hadn't anticipated where I would choose to spend the first nights of my legally single life. Their honeymoon suite. The thought brought a slow, cold smile to my face. Let the games begin. Packing felt surreal. I didn't pack for a luxurious hotel stay. I packed like a spy preparing for an infiltration, or perhaps a ghost returning to haunt the scene of a crime. Not party dresses or silly lingerie. Just the essentials, yes, but chosen with intent. A plain black dress, elegant in its simplicity, something that made me feel put together, not exposed. My warmest, most comfortable robe, the one I wore on countless quiet mornings. Mark slept late, a small comfort in a place of intended discomfort for others. A few books, not light-hearted reads, but weighty tomes that required focus, an anchor in the potential storm. And one object that felt particularly potent, my original wedding photo. Not a framed one for display, but the small, slightly faded copy from the album, tucked into a plain envelope. Why I brought it, I wasn't entirely sure. A reminder? A weapon? A morbid curiosity? It felt necessary, a tangible representation of the history they were trying to erase. The drive across town was short but felt like a journey to another country. The city lights, usually a comforting canvas outside my window, seemed sharper, more indifferent tonight. The Grand Beaumont loomed ahead, an imposing structure of granite and glass, whispering luxury and exclusivity. It wasn't just a building, it was a symbol of a world they belonged to now, a world I had been part of, but felt increasingly alienated from. Pulling up to the valet, I felt a momentary flicker of panic. What was I doing? This was insane. What if they were already here? What if they saw me? But the thought of retreating, of going back to my silent apartment and letting them have their perfect, uninterrupted triumph, spurred me forward. The defiance hardened into resolve. I handed the keys to the valet, my voice steady. Checking in. Eleanor Vance. Vance. Not Miller, Mark's last name, the name I had worn for 20 years until this afternoon. It felt unfamiliar, yet freeing. A name I hadn't used since I was barely more than a girl. Inside, the lobby was exactly as I'd imagined, hushed and opulent. Marble floors, soaring ceilings, the faint scent of expensive perfume and polished wood. It felt like stepping onto a movie set. The receptionist, a young man with an impeccable smile, located my reservation. Ah, Ms. Vance. Welcome to the Grand Beaumont. You'll be in the Imperial Suite. A lovely choice. Lovely. The word hung in the air, dripping with unconscious irony. He had no idea. No idea that this wasn't a choice born of romance or celebration, but of pain and a desperate need to disrupt. He handed me the key card, discreetly, as befitted a guest of the Imperial Suite. As I rode the elevator, the numbers climbing floor by floor, my heart began to race again. The air grew thinner, the silence more profound. This was it. The belly of the beast. The door to the suite was grand, heavy wood. I slid the key card in, heard the soft click, and pushed it open. The suite unfolded before me, a panorama of luxury and excess. A vast living area, plush sofas, a dining table set for more than one. A magnificent bedroom dominated by a sprawling bed, crisp white linens, mountains of pillows. And beyond the windows, the city stretched out, a glittering tapestry. It was, undeniably, stunning. And it was theirs. Or, rather, it was meant to be. The air in the suite felt expectant, charged with the energy of anticipated joy, of celebration. There were fresh flowers in vases, a bottle of champagne chilling on ice, a small box of chocolates on the bedside table. All the trappings of a honeymoon. I walked slowly through the rooms, my footsteps muffled by the deep pile carpet. It felt like walking through someone else's dream, a dream I was now imposing myself upon. I went out onto the terrace. The night air was cool, carrying the distant sounds of the city. I looked out at the lights, hundreds of thousands of windows, each representing a life, a story. And here I was, enacting my own strange, solitary drama in this glass tower. The champagne bottle gleamed on the ice. It felt like an affront. I went back inside, walked over to the table, and with a decisive movement, uncorked it. The pop echoed loudly in the silent suite. I poured a glass, the bubbles rising in the flute. I wasn't celebrating. Not in the way they intended. But perhaps I was celebrating something else. Survival. Resistance. The sheer, stubborn refusal to be extinguished. I raised the glass, not in a toast, but in a silent acknowledgement of the absurdity, the pain, and the strange power of the moment. The first sip was cold and dry on my tongue. I looked around the suite again. This space, designed for intimacy and shared joy, was now my sanctuary, my battleground. It felt wrong, deeply wrong, to be here alone. But it also felt profoundly right. This was where they were supposed to be, reveling in their new life. My presence here was a stone dropped into the placid pond of their happiness, sending ripples of disruption outward. I unpacked my small bag, placing the plain black dress on a hanger next to the empty space in the closet where Mark's suits and Veronica's dresses were supposed to hang. The wedding photo remained in my hand for a moment before I placed it face down on the bedside table, hidden from immediate view, a silent witness. Sleep didn't come easily that first night. The magnificent bed felt too large, too empty. Every creak of the old building, every distant siren, seemed amplified in the stillness. I lay awake, staring at the ceiling, the events of the day replaying in my mind. The phone call. Susan's voice. The name Veronica. The word married. The image of the Grand Beaumont. The click of the book now button. And now here I was, in their suite, the planned backdrop for their perfect beginning. It wasn't comfortable, this feeling of being an intruder. But it was, undeniably, powerful. They thought they had moved on, leaving me behind. But I had moved into their space. I had inserted myself into the very heart of their celebration. And as the first hints of dawn began to gray the sky outside the massive windows, a quiet determination settled over me. I wasn't here to weep or to beg. I was here to simply exist, visible and undeniable, in the space they had claimed as their own. Their perfect honeymoon was about to have an unexpected guest. The morning brought a fragile kind of peace. The city outside sparkled under the rising sun. I ordered breakfast from room service, a lavish spread I barely touched, the taste of betrayal still stronger than any food. Eating alone at the large dining table, designed for celebratory meals, felt both desolate and defiant. I knew it was only a matter of time before they discovered my presence. The hotel staff might mention it, or perhaps Mark or Veronica would call the hotel directly to confirm details, only to find the suite already occupied. The tension coiled in my stomach, a tight knot of anticipation. How would they react? Anger? Disbelief? Panic? I pictured their faces, Mark's smooth facade cracking, Veronica's forced sweetness dissolving into fury. The thought, I confess, brought a small, grim sense of satisfaction. Let them squirm. They had blindsided me, hurt me deeply, and expected me to vanish. My presence here was a direct challenge to that expectation. Around mid-morning, a discreet knock came at the door. My heart leaped. Was it them already? I took a deep breath, smoothing the front of my simple robe. Yes, housekeeping, ma'am, a soft voice replied. Not them. Not yet. I opened the door to a pleasant woman with a cleaning cart. Her eyes widened slightly as she took in the size and luxury of the suite. Good morning. Just checking if you needed anything or wanted the suite serviced. Not right now, thank you, I said, keeping my voice level. Perhaps later. She nodded, a polite smile in place. Very good. Please don't hesitate to call if you need anything at all. Her presence, her polite deference, underscored the strangeness of my situation. I was a guest here, a valued customer in this temple of luxury, while simultaneously being a potential disruptor, a thorn in the side of the man who had paid for my life for 2 decades. The hours stretched on, filled with the quiet sounds of the city, the distant hum of traffic, the occasional siren. I tried to read, but the words blurred on the page. My mind kept replaying scenes from my marriage. The early days, full of hope and laughter. The slow, insidious drift apart. The moments I had dismissed as insignificant, now looming large as flashing red flags. Mark's increasing secretiveness. His late nights at work that stretched later and later. The coldness in his eyes when I tried to talk about us. And Veronica. The name whispered through my thoughts like a venomous snake. Had I met her? Had I shaken her hand, smiled politely, while she was already planning to take my place? The layered reveals I mentioned earlier weren't just for this narrative. They were happening inside my own head, peeling back layers of denial and willful ignorance. I remembered a company Christmas party 2 years ago. Mark had introduced me to a new project manager, a woman with bright, eager eyes and a smile that didn't quite reach them. Veronica. She had complimented my dress, asked about my work, all the right things. And Mark had hovered, his hand on her arm a fraction too long, a look in his eyes I hadn't understood then, but saw with perfect clarity now. How blind I had been. Or perhaps, how desperately I had wanted not to see. The pain of the betrayal wasn't just about the affair. It was about the years of lies, the performance Mark had put on. He hadn't just cheated on me, he had cheated me out of a true picture of my own life. He had let me live in a carefully constructed illusion while building his reality elsewhere. This sweet, this grand, extravagant space felt like the physical manifestation of that hidden reality. Their reality. And my presence here was a refusal to let them enjoy it unchallenged. The phone rang. My heart leaped again, but this time it felt different. Less fear, more readiness. It was the hotel front desk. Ms. Vance? Apologies to disturb you. We have a Mr. Mark Miller on the line. He's asking about the Imperial Suite reservation. Should I connect him? The question was simple, polite, but it was the signal. They knew. He knew. A small, almost imperceptible smile touched my lips. Yes, I said. My voice was steady, calm. Please connect him. The silence on the line stretched for a moment, filled only by the faint hum of the hotel's system. Then, Mark's voice, tight with surprise and anger. Eleanor? What the hell? His usual smooth, charming tone was gone, replaced by a raw, exposed irritation. It was music to my ears. Hello, Mark, I replied, my voice soft, deliberately calm. Enjoying your day? Enjoying my... What are you doing? You're in the Imperial Suite? How? Why? He sputtered, disbelief warring with fury. The carefully composed facade was crumbling instantly. I'm staying here, Mark, I said. For a couple of nights. It's a lovely suite, you know. Wonderful views. I could practically hear him pacing on the other end of the line. Lovely suite? Eleanor, this is our suite. We booked this for our honeymoon. Today is our wedding day. His voice rose on the last sentence, full of outrage, as if I were the one who had committed some terrible transgression. The irony was almost unbearable. Yes, I know, I said. Susan told me. Congratulations, by the way. On the wedding. And on the divorce being finalized, of course. Such an eventful day for you. My calm tone seemed to infuriate him further. Don't play games, Eleanor. Get out of that suite. No. This is ridiculous. Is it? I asked, genuinely curious. More ridiculous than getting married the same day your divorce is finalized, in a rush, without even having the decency to tell the person you spent 20 years with? The question hung in the air. He didn't answer immediately. That's none of your business, he finally snapped, the defensiveness clear. It's my business when you choose to make a public spectacle of my erasure on the very day I regain my legal freedom, I said. And frankly, after 20 years, I think I've earned the right to occupy a little space in your life, don't you? He was breathing heavily into the phone. This is harassment, Eleanor. I'll call the police. I'll have you removed. Threats. Always threats when he didn't get his way. On what grounds, Mark? I asked, my voice still quiet. I'm a registered guest. I paid for the suite. I haven't broken any laws. Unlike, perhaps, certain people who might have been conducting long-term affairs while presenting a picture of marital fidelity. The unspoken hung between us. His silence was confirmation. The tension thickened, no longer just anticipation, but a live wire buzzing between us, across the phone lines, across the city. Their perfect day was unraveling, starting with a simple hotel reservation. And I was holding the thread. His silence was deafening, a gaping hole where bluster usually resided. He knew I wouldn't back down easily, not now. He also knew I knew things. Not everything, perhaps, but enough to make his carefully constructed new life uncomfortable. Veronica was probably listening in, her face a mask of fury. This isn't over, Eleanor, he finally hissed, his voice low and menacing. You can't just waltz in and ruin things. Ruin things? I repeated softly. Mark, you ruined things a long time ago. I'm just observing the consequences. He hung up abruptly. The dial tone buzzed in my ear, a harsh sound after the charged silence. I lowered the phone slowly. My hand wasn't shaking. A quiet sense of power, unfamiliar yet deeply satisfying, spread through me. It wasn't the power of force or manipulation, the kind Mark wielded. It was the power of truth, of presence, of refusing to be invisible. I spent the rest of the day in the suite, moving through the opulent rooms like a phantom. I sat by the window, watching the city, a silent spectator to the lives unfolding below. I thought about Veronica. What kind of woman marries a man the day his divorce is final? What kind of woman builds her happiness so openly on the ashes of someone else's life? Was she cruel? Oblivious? Or simply opportunistic? The memory of her smile at that Christmas party, the one that didn't reach her eyes, came back to me. Perhaps she was more complex than I gave her credit for. Or perhaps not. The evening descended, painting the city in hues of gold and twilight. The suite, designed for romantic dinners and shared moments, felt vast and lonely. But the loneliness was different from the one I'd felt in my quiet apartment. This was an active, chosen solitude, a defiance of the purpose of the space. Around 7 o'clock, another knock came at the door. This time, my intuition screamed it was them. I smoothed my hair, adjusted my simple dress. I wasn't hiding. I was ready. I opened the door. They stood there, side by side, a picture of forced composure. Mark in a sharp suit, Veronica in a beautiful, perhaps a little too revealing, dress. They looked like they were dressed for a celebration, which, of course, they were supposed to be having. Their smiles were tight, their eyes cold. "Eleanor," Mark said, his voice still strained, but with a veneer of polite exasperation for the benefit of anyone watching. The hallway was empty, but you could feel their awareness of the potential audience. "Let's be reasonable." "Reasonable?" I echoed. "By all means, step into my reasonable temporary residence." I didn't step aside to let them in. I simply stood in the doorway, blocking their path. They hadn't anticipated this. They expected me to open the door, perhaps cry, perhaps shout. My calm stillness threw them off balance. "We need to talk," Veronica said, stepping forward slightly. Her voice was sweet, a little too sweet, like sugar coating something bitter. Her eyes flickered around the suite visible behind me, taking in the untouched champagne, the general air of my occupation. "There's nothing to talk about," I said. "I'm staying here." "You're not." "But it's our honeymoon." Mark burst out again, losing the composure. "We reserved it." "Apparently, you didn't secure it," I said, injecting just a touch of genuine confusion into my voice. "Or perhaps there was a cancellation. These things happen." I watched their faces. The disbelief. The dawning realization that I wasn't just making a point, I was physically occupying their space, preventing their plans. "You did this deliberately," Veronica accused, her sweet tone hardening. "You booked it knowing we wanted it." "Did I?" I mused aloud, pretending to consider. "Well, it is a lovely suite. Very popular, I imagine." "Get out, Eleanor," Mark said, his voice low and dangerous. "Now, or I swear, I'll make you regret it." "More than you already have?" I asked, a rhetorical question that cut through the tension. The color drained slightly from his face. He knew what I meant. The years of neglect, the lies, the financial maneuvering in the divorce. "This is pathetic," Veronica sneered, her mask fully dropped now. "Are you really so desperate that you have to squat in our honeymoon suite? Can't you stand seeing Mark happy?" "Seeing Mark happy isn't the issue," I replied, my voice still quiet, but with a steel edge they couldn't miss. "Seeing him build his happiness on a foundation of lies and disrespect, and then flaunt it in my face the moment he's legally free, that I have a problem with." "We offered you a settlement," Mark interjected, trying to regain control by shifting to familiar ground. "A generous settlement." "Generous?" I almost laughed. "Mark, you know as well as I do that what you left me with was barely enough to live on, after 20 years of supporting your career." "That's irrelevant now," he snapped. "The divorce is final." "Precisely," I said. "And now I am choosing how to spend the first nights of my freedom. In a very comfortable, very expensive suite. One that happens to be otherwise engaged tonight." The unspoken words hung in the air. "Engaged by me." Their frustration was palpable. They couldn't force me out. They couldn't argue with a valid reservation. I was within my rights as a hotel guest. Their power over me, which had always been tied to the marriage and Mark's control of the finances and narrative, was dissolving in the face of my simple, quiet presence. "This is childish," Veronica spat, stepping back, her arms crossed. "You think this hurts us? It just makes you look sad and bitter." Perhaps, I conceded. Or perhaps it makes me look like a woman who refuses to be erased. A woman who decides where she will be, even if it's in the most inconvenient place possible for those who wronged her. I saw a flicker of something in Mark's eyes. Not regret, perhaps not even understanding, but a dawning awareness that I wasn't the same woman he had divorced. Something had shifted. I was no longer reacting, I was acting. And my actions were entirely outside his control. The power dynamic was beginning to invert. They were used to being in control, to setting the terms, to me being the quiet, amenable wife. My presence here was a disruption of the most fundamental kind, a disruption of their perception of me. They stood there for a few more moments, a tableau of frustrated entitlement. Mark's face was a mask of barely suppressed rage, Veronica's a mixture of anger and a kind of bewildered annoyance, as if I were a fly that had landed in her expensive soup. Neither of them could seem to articulate a coherent response that wasn't a threat or an insult. They were adrift without their usual tools of manipulation and control. The silence stretched, thick with unspoken accusations and my own quiet resolve. Finally, Mark sighed, a dramatic, put-upon sound. "This is pointless," he muttered, glancing at Veronica. "She's clearly not going to leave." "No, I'm not," I confirmed softly. Veronica squared her shoulders, forcing a brittle smile that didn't reach her eyes. "Fine. Enjoy your suite. We'll find somewhere else." Her voice was laced with acid. "I'm sure you will," I replied, mirroring her politeness, but stripping it of warmth. "The city has many lovely hotels." Mark gave me one last, venomous look. "You think you've won something here, Eleanor," he said, his voice low. "But this is just sad. Really, really sad. And marrying someone the day you divorce the mother of your theoretical children isn't?" I countered, my voice still calm, but the question hit its mark. He flinched. Veronica tugged at his arm. "Let's go, Mark. This is beneath us." "Beneath you?" I chuckled softly, a low, ironic sound. "After everything? I doubt there's much left that's beneath either of you." Without another word, they turned and walked away down the long, silent corridor. I watched them go, their retreating backs radiating thwarted fury. The heavy door of the suite felt lighter as I closed it. The silence returned, but it was different now. It wasn't the silence of emptiness or despair. It was the silence of a battle fought, at least for the moment, to a standstill. I leaned back against the door, my heart pounding not from fear, but from the sheer intensity of the confrontation. They had come expecting to bully me out, to reclaim their space and their narrative. Instead, they had left defeated, their celebration overshadowed by my quiet, unexpected presence. I walked back into the living area, the opulence of the suite no longer feeling alien, but almost like an accomplice. This space, meant to be a symbol of their triumph, had become the stage for their humiliation. I poured myself another glass of champagne, the bubbles less celebratory this time, more like effervescent defiance. I sat on the plush sofa, the city lights spread out before me, a silent audience. The confrontation, brief as it was, had been draining. But it had also been clarifying. Seeing them together, seeing their entitlement, and their sudden vulnerability when faced with something they couldn't control, had solidified something within me. They weren't the invincible figures they had seemed during the divorce proceedings, when Mark's lawyers had circled like vultures and Veronica had been the silent, unseen presence hovering in the background. Here in the open, confronted directly, they were just two people whose plans had gone awry, exposed in their petulance. The night stretched ahead. The suite was mine for another night. I didn't feel like celebrating. I didn't feel like mourning. I felt a strange mixture of exhaustion and exhilaration. This act, this impulsive, perhaps slightly mad decision to occupy their honeymoon suite, had given me something I hadn't realized I'd lost: agency. I had taken a situation designed to hurt and diminish me and turned it into a stage for my own quiet rebellion. The layers of betrayal continued to unfold in my mind. It wasn't just the affair. It was the way Mark had slowly, deliberately, isolated me over the years, discouraging my friendships, subtly undermining my confidence, making me feel dependent on him. Veronica was just the final, visible piece of a much larger pattern of control and manipulation. The divorce had been a brutal awakening. It stripped away the life I had known, but it also stripped away the illusion. I had been so caught up in the role of wife, of partner, that I had lost sight of who I was independently. This act, this solitary occupation of their intended space, felt like a reclaiming. A declaration that I existed, that I mattered, that I would not be quietly swept aside. I retrieved the wedding photo from the bedside table. I looked at the younger versions of ourselves, smiling, full of hope. The irony was almost unbearable. We stood on the precipice of a future we both believed in, a future that turned out to be a mirage. I didn't feel sentimental looking at it. I felt a profound sadness for the woman I had been, so full of trust, so unaware of the capacity for deceit in the man she loved. I put the photo away, not because it was too painful, but because it felt distant, like a scene from a movie about someone else's life. My life was here now, in this luxurious, charged space, in the quiet hum of the city outside, in the stillness of my own company. I didn't need the photo to remind me of what was lost. The betrayal was etched into the very fabric of my being. But the strength I was discovering, here in the heart of their planned celebration, was new. It was hard-won and felt like a lifeline. The next day dawned, quiet and gray. The city outside seemed muted, matching the reflective mood that had settled over me after the previous night's confrontation. Mark and Veronica hadn't returned, and the hotel staff maintained their discreet distance, blissfully unaware, or perhaps expertly pretending to be, of the drama unfolding within the imperial suite. I moved through the large rooms, performing the mundane tasks of getting ready, showering, dressing in simple clothes, but every action felt imbued with significance in this setting. This grand suite, meant for shared intimacy and joy, was a solitary stage for my quiet processing. The pain of betrayal hadn't vanished, but it felt less sharp, less debilitating. It was a dull ache now, something I could live with, navigate around. The raw shock had been replaced by a deeper, more nuanced understanding of what had happened, not just the affair and the divorce, but the long, slow erosion of trust and respect that had characterized the final years of the marriage. I ordered coffee and sat by the window again, watching the city come to life. I thought about the layered reveals from the past few days. Susan's phone call, dropping the bomb of the immediate remarriage. Finding the suite available, an ironic twist of fate or perhaps something more. Their sputtering rage at my presence, confirming their guilt and their desperation to control the narrative. Veronica's mask slipping, revealing the sharp edges beneath the sweet facade. Each interaction, each moment of reflection, added another piece to the puzzle, creating a clearer, albeit painful, picture of the reality I had been living in. I realized that my presence in the suite wasn't just about inconveniencing them or disrupting their plans. It was about giving myself space to process, to feel, to understand, outside of the confines of my small, lonely apartment, outside of the familiar settings that were saturated with memories of Mark. This opulent, impersonal space became a neutral zone, a place where I could finally begin to untangle my emotions from the history of the marriage. I remembered a conversation with Mark years ago, early in our marriage. We were walking by the Grand Beaumont, and he had pointed up at the Imperial Suite windows, saying, "One day, when we've made it, we'll stay there. Celebrate everything we've built together." The memory was bittersweet. The everything we've built had crumbled, and the celebration was happening, just not in the way either of us had envisioned then. The irony was a heavy cloak. He was celebrating his new life, built partly on the ruins of our old one, while I was occupying the very symbol of the future he had once promised me. But the bitterness was tempered by a growing sense of liberation. By taking the space, I had taken back a piece of my own narrative. I was no longer just the passive recipient of his actions. I was an active participant in the unfolding drama. I wasn't acting out of desperation, as Veronica had suggested, but out of a quiet, fierce need to assert my existence. The hotel staff, when they came by later to service the suite, were still polite and professional, oblivious to the undercurrents. They cleaned, they restocked, they made the bed, all with the practiced efficiency of those who move through spaces of wealth and privilege. Their mundane tasks highlighted the surreal nature of my situation. Here I was, plotting my quiet rebellion amidst crisp linens and gleaming surfaces, while they went about their jobs, vacuuming away the dust of my emotional turmoil. I spent the afternoon reading, the words finally settling, providing a distraction, a temporary escape into other worlds. But even in those worlds, the themes of betrayal, resilience, and the search for truth resonated. I thought about the power inversion that had happened last night. For years, Mark had held the power, financial, emotional, the power to define our reality. By simply being in the suite, I had shifted that balance, albeit temporarily. I had forced him to confront me on my terms, in a space he had intended to be free of my presence. It was a small victory, perhaps, but it felt significant. It was a reminder that power isn't always about control or dominance. Sometimes, it's just about refusing to be controlled, refusing to be silent. As evening approached on my second and final night, I felt a different kind of tension. The confrontation was over, but the departure loomed. How would I leave? Quietly slipping away? Or would I make a statement? The thought of simply walking out, my stay complete, held a certain appeal. It would be the ultimate quiet defiance, occupying their space, disrupting their plans, and then leaving without fanfare, a ghost who had made her presence undeniably felt. I looked around the suite one last time. It no longer felt like theirs. It felt like a space I had temporarily inhabited, a cocoon where I had shed a layer of my old self and emerged. What? Not fully healed, not undamaged, but stronger, more centered. The pain was still there, a part of my story, but it no longer defined me entirely. The feeling of resignation I had carried for months was gone, replaced by a sense of quiet empowerment. I had faced them not with anger or tears, but with my presence and my truth. And in doing so, I had taken back a piece of myself. The final morning in the suite arrived. A different quality of light filtered through the massive windows, soft and gray. It felt like the city was holding its breath, waiting for me to make my move. I went through the motions of getting ready, a ritual of preparing to re-enter the real world, the one outside this gilded cage. My small suitcase, packed with simple clothes, seemed inadequate for the grand exit from such a place. But its simplicity felt right. I wasn't leaving with more possessions, just with a different understanding of myself. I ate a light breakfast, the quiet hum of the suite settling around me. It was a stark contrast to the expected sounds of a honeymoon: laughter, whispered secrets, shared moments. My solitary occupation had imbued this space with a different kind of energy, one of reflection and quiet strength rather than effervescent joy. I thought about Mark and Veronica. Where had they gone after leaving the hotel the previous night? Had they found another luxurious suite? Had the incident cast a pall over their celebration? The thought wasn't malicious, just a simple acknowledgement of cause and effect. My presence had disrupted their carefully planned narrative, and that was precisely the point. The layered reveals of the past 2 days had solidified my understanding of the marriage and its ending. It wasn't a sudden collapse, but a slow, deliberate dismantling by one party while the other remained in the dark. Mark's immediate remarriage wasn't just a cruel twist, it was the punctuation mark on a long-running deception. And my decision to come here, to occupy their space, was my way of writing my own punctuation mark. A defiant exclamation point, a silent assertion that I would not be erased. The pang of bittersweetness was still there. This grand suite, this symbol of new beginnings, was also a poignant reminder of the ending of my own life with Mark. But the bitterness was less corrosive now. It was mixed with the emerging taste of freedom, of reclaiming my own identity. I packed the last few items, ensuring I left no trace of my presence beyond the standard wear and tear of a hotel guest. Except for the wedding photo. I hesitated for a moment, then took it out of the envelope. I looked at the smiling faces one last time. Then, deliberately, I walked over to the trash can and dropped it in. It wasn't an act of anger, but of finality. That future was gone. Those people were gone. I wasn't that woman anymore, and he wasn't the man I had married. It was time to let the image go. I didn't feel a surge of catharsis, just a quiet sense of completion. As checkout time approached, I made one final circuit of the suite. The bedroom, the living area, the terrace with its sweeping city view. Each space held the echo of my solitary stand. It felt like a sacred space now, not because of its luxury, but because of the emotional transformation that had occurred within its walls. I wasn't the same woman who had arrived here 2 nights ago, heartbroken and reeling from betrayal. The quiet strength I had always possessed, perhaps hidden beneath the layers of being a wife and partner, had come to the surface, tempered and hardened by fire. I called the front desk. "Yes, Ms. Vance?" Checking out, the same polite receptionist from before asked. "Yes," I confirmed. "Thank you. I'll be down shortly." There was no fanfare, no dramatic exit planned. Just the quiet act of leaving. This wasn't a performance for them, it was a completion of something for myself. I took one last look around, a final internal photograph of the space. Then, with a sense of quiet determination, I picked up my suitcase and walked towards the door. Stepping out into the hallway, the silence of the suite closed behind me. The air felt different out here, less charged, more neutral. I walked towards the elevators, my footsteps echoing softly. As I waited, I saw a hotel employee pushing a cart laden with fresh towels and linens towards the Imperial Suite. He smiled politely as I passed. Life in the hotel went on, the machinery of luxury humming along, ready for the next guest, the next story. I rode the elevator down, watching the floor numbers descend. Each floor felt like shedding another layer of the past few days, of the past 2 decades. When the doors opened into the bustling lobby, I felt a momentary disorientation. The noise, the people, the sheer normalcy of it all was jarring after the charged solitude of the suite. I walked towards the front desk, handed the key card back to the receptionist. "Thank you for your stay, Ms. Vance," he said, his smile genuine. "We hope to see you again." "Perhaps," I replied, a small, knowing smile touching my lips. He had no idea the significance of my stay, the drama that had unfolded just floors above his head. And that was the point. I hadn't come here for public spectacle, but for a private reclamation. Walking out of the Grand Beaumont and into the bright morning light, I felt a sense of closure. Not because everything was suddenly resolved or healed, but because I had taken back my power. I had refused to be a victim, refused to be invisible. I had occupied their space, faced them, and emerged not unscathed, but undeniably stronger. The city outside the hotel felt vast and full of possibilities. The pain of the betrayal was a scar, a part of my history, but it was no longer an open wound. I was Eleanor Vance, a woman who had faced down a calculated betrayal in a honeymoon suite and walked away, not with bitterness, but with a quiet, fierce sense of self. The future stretched ahead, uncertain, but for the first time in a long time, it felt like my own.